Hello, my name is Andril Recla, and this is my process video on the Art 31 assignment, Technology and its Impact on Art. Alright, so let's get started first with my research on different art styles pertaining to this unit. First off, Precisionism. Precisionism was a movement that originated in the mid-times between World War I and World War II. It was usually done in a kind of realistic-looking style, with subjects being usually mundane, normal scenes in commercial and industrial settings, with industrial architecture being a prominent center for many precisionist works. And lots of precisionists were actually hired by different companies like Ford and stuff to paint their factories and whatnot. They depicted the modern emergence of straight-edged, precise, industrialized settings that contrasted landscapes and other fluid nature-based scenes common to traditional art. Moving on is constructivism emerged during the Russian Revolution and later spread to places like Germany in the 1950s. This style of art focused on more so an object's state of being, an object being rather than a metaphorical meaning or composition. These art objects were made not to express beauty or represent something, rather to carry out a fundamental perception of the materials and forms of art themselves that could lead to the design of purposeful objects similar to that of architecture. And the next one, which is Futurism, builds upon the idea of the rejection of traditional art norms for the embracement of subjects related to modern machine-like qualities, like movement and innovation, as seen in this painting here, which tries to capture the chaos and violence and movement of this protest that the artist was at, or funeral proceeding, sorry. This piece tries to capture motion in a painting, almost similar to that of how movies work with frames. Next up is pop art. Pop art was a movement from the 1950s and 1960s that took, don't want to print that took inspiration from the new media of commercial and popular culture. Although it did not have a specific style or attitude, pop art was a broader response to modern society's commodity and idol-driven values, often using commonplace objects or pop culture icons as subject matter or as part of the work, such as celebrities or soup cans. Soup cans, specifically in the case of one of the biggest influencers of pop art, Andy Warhol. In his early career, Andy's grid-like paintings of dollar bills from 1962 were his earliest attempts at something called silkscreen printing, which is the process of using a silkscreen and ink or paint to transfer an image onto a surface, as a way to incorporate modern machinist aspects into his art. Warhol eventually learned to use photographs as the basis for his prints, which led to the use of celebrity photos and such to create his works, like for example with Monroe here. This repurposement of a printing process, usually reserved for commercial use in art, was an innovative addition to the art world, a rejection of traditional norms and an embracement for modern machine-influenced work. One of his most famous quotes even further shows this when he said in an interview, "I want to be a machine," quote. After all my research, my goal was to also create a work that utilized the gritty accuracy of photo-influenced art and the new source of subject in modern-day society, heavily influenced by Andy Warhol specifically. Let's go to technical development. These are more pictures of Andy Warhol's work. Okay. And this is the painting that I made over here. Okay, technical development. I don't exactly have the methods to silkscreen print something. I wanted to until I realized how much work you actually had to do to and things you had to buy to do that, so I had to find alternative means. I did eventually find a printing method similar to silkscreen printing in that it allowed me to have fairly accurate yet gritty prints of photos, similar to what Warhol was doing. I put a photo on my monitor and used Photoshop and other editing tools to increase the contrast and blur of the image. This is the original image that I took, and this is after I edited it a bit. Um, as you can see, I edited the contrast and also the blur for it with Photoshop. After that, I would tape a piece of parchment paper to the actual screen, trace the outline of the image that I wanted, then I would scribble a very soft grade of pencil onto the backside, black backside that was originally touching the monitor itself. I would put that onto my canvas, and then I would use a hard grade pencil like an H6 or something to to follow the lines that I already drew down, to leave an imprint of that soft graphite underneath onto the actual canvas. I use this to mimic and create that almost printer-like composition that actual silk printing had. And I actually had to research this a bit, as I'd only read about it before in articles and stuff, and heard about other people using parchment paper to trace things from like their computer screen or light boxes. I also had to practice with a very small brush to get the very small accurate shapes in the painting, like the little tiny lines and stuff. I wasn't used to having such specific and exact paint lines and shapes and stuff. Communication. During my research, I learned that Andy picked his subjects based on things that he really liked and were common to pop culture and easily accessible. This was his reasoning for choosing the soup cans, as they were his favorite soup. You see them in every single grocery store in America, and they're very cheap and easy to buy and accessible. And almost everybody, can relate to soup cans. And same thing with Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, and the other celebrities that he used as subjects for his artwork. I chose to go the celebrity route and have Kurt Cobain, the lead singer and songwriter for Nirvana, as my subject. I'm really into Nirvana and other grungy alt rock bands from the 90s, and Nirvana is a very big part of pop culture. I mean, you see people wearing their t-shirts everywhere, even almost 30 years after they disbanded following the passing of Kurt. Pop art is sort of a rebellious style against the art elitist culture by embracing common non-traditional subjects that weren't really considered art because they didn't fit the conventional idea of it before pop art became mainstream. It's easy to interpret and accessible. Kurt, the subject himself, also kind of represents that. Nirvana became a worldwide sensation, one of the biggest bands of all time, rubbing shoulders in the charts with the likes of pop singers. Yet they didn't let the professional pop music elitism culture at the time change the way that they made their music. It was accessible, they didn't charge crazy prices for their concerts, and didn't flaunt their money or status like some pop singers at the time who had similar album sales and concert ticket sales as them. They were like the pop art of the music world, and so I think Kurt is a great subject for a pop art piece. The funky glasses he's wearing here are also in part of why I chose this specific picture. The glasses kind of represent that air of rebellious innovation that pop art and Nirvana stood for. They're a symbol of it, especially in the new 20s with many modern celebrities donning these funky 50s style shades as a reference to Nirvana's effect and to project the same idealism that they projected. And it's even become a TikTok trend to wear them in recent times, even further pushing the idea of pop culture accessibility and anti-art elitism culture. I don't think you can get any farther from fancy art elitism than an adolescent TikTok fashion trend. This piece, making this piece, I tried to push the idea of innovation of art in the modern age and experimentism, as well as the utilization of technology for both creation and subject for this piece. Concerning refinement, one thing I did was, despite my efforts to be as accurate as possible with the painting and lining, I constantly made little brush mistakes with my hand shaking or something like that forced me to dry the paint and then pray that my hand didn't shake when I painted over it again to fix. While doing that over and over again, I had an idea of using my waterproof brush marker to get the very thin lines that I couldn't do with my smallest brush, as that photo accuracy aspect of this piece especially was so important. And using that actually turned out pretty well, considering I was using black paint straight out of the tube, and it blended pretty decently with the marker. Yeah, that's mostly it. Yeah, that's all I have to say for this. This is the last process video that I have to record, so by the time it's posted and I hand it in, the classes might be near the end or over. If it is, then thanks for letting me do the Art 31 curriculum. You've been a really cool art teacher since grade 10, and I hope you have a good year in the second semester. All the best in your future art teachings, and I hope marking all of these art assignments aren't too stressful. Goodbye.